Starting off with number 10, over in the United Kingdom, we have Mr. George Mellon, a wealthy businessman. Age 54, was having marital problems with his wife, Muriel, age 33. Muriel stated that at the time of George's death, they were going through a rough divorce after an even rougher marriage. George would end up staying at various hotels, while Muriel was living in the luxury farmhouse they both didn't want to part with. Getting closer to the divorce finalizing, George decided to start spending lots and lots of money. 2007. The day of court, the judge awarded her an extra £100 to help her with bills and the upkeep of the expensive luxury farmhouse. After court, they walked to their vehicles, where he showed her a rope, stating that it was what he would use to end his own life. She told him to grow up and demanded he give her the rope. He just laughed. She said that he had threatened suicide before, so she didn't take him seriously. As she walked away, she began to hear a lot of commotion and yelling. Onlookers all over the busy courtside street, and Muriel all had to watch after he tied one end of the rope to a tree and the other end around his neck. 2007. Took off at top speed. His headless body was seen accelerating down the street in his $90,000 convertible Aston Martin. She soon found out about the debt and the cancellation of the life insurance, leaving her no choice but to sell the luxury farmhouse she loved after all.
Number 9. Still in the United Kingdom, we have the extremely bizarre death of Richard Sumner. Number 9.
He would end up going deep into the woods and handcuff himself to a tree. Detective Gallienne said Mr. Sumner first tried to kill himself in 1996 when he managed to free himself after being tied to a tree for 4 days. The second occasion was in 1999, and the third was just a week before he eventually disappeared for good. But in 2005, he was missing for 3 years before someone stumbled across his remains, handcuffed to a tree deep in the woods. There were deep scuff marks on the tree, indicating he had tried to change his mind once again and break free. But this time, the key to his handcuffs was just a few feet out of reach. Number 8. In January of 2003, a man walked into his son's room to find one of the most bizarre Un-Alivings ever in history. Carpenter Boyd Taylor spent 3 months constructing a huge machine in secret in his bedroom. The 36-year-old loner, who shared a cottage with his father, told his dad that he was simply working on a woodworking project. But behind a double door in his bedroom, he built what a coroner described He built what a coroner described as an ingenious construction, an 8-foot high, 3-foot wide frame to house a razor sharp blade, activated by a complex timing mechanism. On that fateful evening in 2003, he ended up taking 12 sleeping pills, then lay under the guillotine, knowing the medication was so strong that his position in bed would not alter. At 3:30 a.m. on January 8th, the device was triggered, and Boyd was decapitated. His father, Robert, age 60, found him later covered in blood. In a statement to the inquest at Ashington, Northumberland, Mr. Taylor said, Boyd said he was taking a break from work until after Christmas. He wanted to concentrate on his woodworking shop. He had erected another door inside his bedroom door. He said it was for security because we had been burglared recently. He spent a lot of time in his room, but I never went in. It was his space, said his dad. The guillotine blade was weighted with a paving slab, wired to a piece of plywood. That, in turn, was wedged into a wooden block at the foot of Boyd's bed. An electric jigsaw was set up next to the contraption and plugged into a timer switch, which would start the saw, cutting the wood and releasing the wire that held the blade. Boyd even created a device to cut out the power, so he would not be discovered for some time. He carved a Gothic-style wooden hammer, which was raised using thread and attached to the guillotine. When the blade was released, it cut the thread, letting the hammer swing. hit a peg, and knock out the power. On the night his father heard the rumble of the blade and got up, thinking that the chimney had collapsed. But upon inspection, saw that it did not. Everything seemed fine, so I returned to bed and went to sleep, said Mr. Taylor. The father, who ran a building firm with Boyd, went to work, and when he returned to his home in Milbourne, he hammered down his son's bedroom. I saw Boyd lying on the bed covered in blood, said Mr. Taylor in his statement. Boyd left no note. Mr. Taylor said Boyd had never gotten over his parents' divorce when he was just 15 years old. He had few friends or hobbies, never had a girlfriend, and spent most of his time locked in his bedroom. Coroner Eric Armstrong said, Boyd Taylor had gone to an extreme length over a period of time to construct this device. A good deal of thought had gone into the construction, which was ingenious, if applied to a somewhat bizarre and extremely sad purpose. There can only be one conclusion, that this was a deliberate attempt to end his own life. Number 7. Computer games have evolved dramatically since the days of octopus chomping Pac-Man. In fact, it is now possible for anyone to create a virtual character online and interact with millions of other people from around the world, giving some introverts a sort of safe space to be social and outgoing in their own way. But sometimes video games can become a real addiction, taking over people's lives so severely that over some time they end up cutting off family and friends, losing or gaining a significant amount of weight, stop taking care of themselves, such as personal hygiene, but sometimes lose their jobs and focus solely on their gaming. But for this young man, you take all of those bad things that can happen over time and compacts them into just a few short days, and you've got a tragic situation. I know I can't say this name right, but Lee Seung Seop of Korea was 28 when he was visiting a gaming cafe, playing his favorite game at the time, World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft, or WoW for short, is an online game that lets you choose from different characters of mystical races and play, explore, and fight with other people from all world. According to some estimates, World of Warcraft has around 8.1 million monthly players and around 4.5 million subscribers in 2023. The daily player count ranges from over 620,000 to 2,372,029 players. Just so you have an idea of how popular and addicting this game truly is. This 28-year-old man died of dehydration and heart failure. After a 50-hour straight session of World of Warcraft. Throughout this period, he had very little to drink and practically no food, and eventually collapsed from exhaustion, dying shortly afterwards. An online funeral was held for him, where more than 2,000 players gathered at a memorial site in the game and observed a minute of virtual silence. Number 6. In 2012, a wealthy Nigerian man by the name of Yoroko Onoja of Ogbadibo, a small region in the country's mid-eastern Benue state, was, capital R word, by his 6 wives. According to a report in Nigeria's Daily Post, Onoja was attacked by 5 of his wives with sticks and knives while engaging in sexual intercourse with his youngest wife. The other wives then demanded that he have sexual intercourse with all of them at once. Anoja allegedly resisted the attack at first, but was soon overpowered by the 6 women, who coerced him to have intercourse with each spouse in ascending order of age. The Nigerian Daily Post writes that Anoja was returning from a local bar in the Ogbugbu God, these names are horrible, at 3 in the morning last Tuesday. Upon returning home, he walked into the bedroom of his youngest wife. His 5 other wives, who had been planning the attack, then ambushed him while he was, distracted. Anoja allegedly stopped breathing after the 4th of his wives left the room. The 5th noticed as she was approaching him for intercourse. The youngest wife attempted to resuscitate him, but to no avail. Number 5. Stephen Winfrey, age 50, had hunted rabbits for most of his life and used ferrets and dogs to help catch them. He went he went hunting at Squirrel Wood Scout Camp near Doncaster, South Yorks on New Year's Day. The inquest heard how Mr. Winfrey's family raised concerns after he did not appear for a New Year's Day lunch they organized at 1 p.m., so they called the police the next day. A member of the public found his body the next day with his bottom half sticking out of a rabbit hole at his favorite spot. PC Richard Hall told Doncaster Coroner's Court, "We found a male head first in a hole. Only his legs and torso were visible. He was at a 45-degree angle, curved around the hole. There were scratch marks on the ground. It became obvious that the man was deceased." PC Hall said Mr. Winfrey of Doncaster, South Yorks, had been wedged in the hole. He had taken off his welly boots and jacket, which were found next to the hole, along with 2 bags containing ferrets, a spade, knives, and a net. Officers also discovered a dead rabbit and a fresh mound of soil next to the hole where his head was stuck. Well, half his body was stuck. Mr. Winfrey's dog had been tied to a tree nearby. A toxicological screening found alcohol and amphetamine in Mr. Winfrey's blood. Despite it being impossible to say how much of either substance was present, they may have affected his decision making process. Number 4. This name is impossible, so I'm just going to maybe put it up on the screen for you instead. Fajiliu Mukhametsyanov from Kazan, Russia, was just 49 when she collapsed at home, suffering from chest pains in 2011. Her husband, 51 at the time, opted for an open coffin funeral for his wife following her collapse, being fatal. However, the grief stricken lover was in for a shock when he went to say his final goodbyes at the funeral, just to have his wife spring back to life in front of him. After hearing mourners pray for her soul, she opened her eyes to find herself in the bizarrest of situations. Mrs. Fajiliu started screaming, being fatal. However, the grief stricken lover was in for a shock when he went to say his final goodbyes at the funeral, just to have his wife spring back to life in front of him. After her shocked husband described how they immediately rushed her back to the hospital, but she only lived for another 12 minutes in intensive care before she died again, this time for good. Number 3. In 2011, a teenager who was fishing in the Yatta River was found dead. I know you'd probably be guessing that it was a drowning or something of the sort, but it definitely wasn't. In Bolivia, we have the case of an unnamed teenager who had been drinking alcohol while in a canoe on the Yatta River, which family and friends stated he had been very familiar with. Alcohol while in a canoe on the Yatta River, which family and friends stated he had been very familiar with. He had allegedly leaped into the Yatta River one day and was eaten alive by flesh-eating piranhas, which were well known to be in large numbers in that river. He had allegedly leaped into the Yatta River one day and was eaten alive by flesh-eating piranhas, which were well known to be in large numbers in that river. He had allegedly leaped into the Yatta River one day and was eaten alive by flesh-eating piranhas, which were well known to be in large numbers in that river. It is said that he had to have been ending his own life as he knew about the piranhas and was very familiar with the river. Officer Daniel Kayaya said the teen bled to death after the attack. It is said that he had to have been ending his own life as he knew about the piranhas and was very familiar with the river. Number 2. Ilda Vitor Maciel of Rio de Janeiro died in December of 2012 at the age of 88. A nursing technician mistakenly injected soup into the woman's IV in her right arm instead of her feeding tube. Maciel's daughter was with her when the injection happened and said her mother started to squirm uncomfortably and stick as soon as the soup was injected. She had said she had not seen her mother that physically distraught since being in the hospital. Maciel died just 12 hours after receiving the injection. The director of the hospital acknowledged the error but does not admit it is related directly to the patient's death. The Medico Legal Institute is still investigating the cause of death. Number 1. So, we couldn't really decide on number 1, so we've got a tie between two of the most bizarre deaths of the 20th century. You guys should get to tell us which one you think takes the win down below in the comments. First, we have Canadian lawyer Gary Hoy, who died while trying to prove that the glass in the windows of his office in the 24th floor was unbreakable. How could he do this, you ask? By throwing himself against the glass, which he was right. It didn't break, but it did, however, pop out of its frame and he fell to his death. And then we have, in 2007 in India, the deputy mayor of Delhi, in India, in 2007, the deputy mayor of Delhi, Surinder Singh Bajwa, who died while Surinder Singh Bajwa, I know I just butchered that, died falling off a balcony while trying to fend off a troop of attacking monkeys. Surinder Singh Bajwa. I know I just butchered that. Well, that's it for today, guys. I don't know how to end this stuff out. Yeah, so vote and let me know which one of those last two you thought and should be in number 1. Leave your answer down below in the comments. I don't know what I'm supposed to say for this part right here. Blah, 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 Jesus. I need to have bloopers or something. As many. Wow, whatever.